All right. I see our next guest here backstage. Let's bring him to the front stage, guys. Dr. Chowdhury. He is the CEO. There he is, CEO of Nemaura Medical. How are you doing today, Dr. Chowdhury?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Doing fantastic. Let's go and bring your slides up on the screen, guys. As soon as you share them. Oh, there we are. Boom. Boom, boom, boom. There we go. All right. The floor is yours, sir.
Super. Thanks very much. Thank you all for listening in today. And again, thank you to Benzinga for inviting us and giving us this opportunity to present at this conference. So I'm Faz Chowdhury, CEO of Nemaura Medical. First of all, a few forward-looking statements to bring to your attention. And so let's jump straight to what is it we are addressing in terms of which space are we in, what is the market, what's the value proposition here. So essentially, we're looking at the obesity and diabetes space. And when you look at it collectively, these are beyond doubt two of the major drivers of the chronic disease epidemic. When you think about the number of disease conditions that can arise, or number of complications that can arise from these conditions, it is quite substantial. And when you look at it both from the point of view of the healthcare expenditure and, of course, the impact on quality of life on individuals. And so as a direct result of that, you have around 500 million people around the world with diabetes today. And the spend, of course, by healthcare providers is phenomenal. Let's just put it that way. And therefore, as a direct result of that, the addressable market is quite big. So that's the market in which we're operating. And what are we operating with? Well, we've basically developed a sensor technology, a wearable sensor technology, which is designed to monitor continuously various things from the skin. And importantly, first of all, we picked glucose for the simple reason that when you look at obesity, prediabetes, and diabetes, it is a huge market opportunity. And that's the reason why we focused on that initially. And later on, I'll be talking about some of the other applications that we are looking at already. And the question is, well, what is the advantage of having a wearable sensor that gives you a continuous output of your glucose profiles over the course of the day? Well, this picture hopefully sums it up. What you've got here is that if you look at those red dots, if you imagine that at different points in time during the day, you were to take a finger prick blood sample and put it on a strip and you look at your blood glucose value. Well, you could do that several times a day. And despite that, you could actually miss the full picture, i.e. the bigger picture, which is that you've got lots of potential fluctuations in your sugar level. And when you look at the long-term prognosis, the long-term complications and implications of diabetes, it arises when you have a lot of fluctuations in your sugar levels as opposed to a steady sugar level overall. And that's why getting the full picture is so important. And I guess I would go as far as to say, based on published literature, looking at the profiles and looking at how much time you spend within a narrow band is now becoming almost a gold standard by which the progress or the ability to manage your glucose levels or your diabetes is being measured now. Hence the importance. So our vision as a company is to lead in the prevention, management, and reversal, potentially, of type 2 diabetes, and using both a low-cost, flexible, wearable sensor platform, but importantly, I would stress, also a digital ecosystem. And I stress that because we took a decision early on that it wasn't enough just to develop and sell sensors to people. It's you have a device, you have a sensor, daily sensor. Yes, it's easy to go out there and just sell that direct to consumer, or in the case of the US, it would be by prescription, for example. But what we felt is that the value add comes from that ecosystem that you build around it, i.e. leaving somebody to their own devices and letting them make their own decisions isn't enough in this day and age. Providing them with support, providing them with information, advice, etc. And of course, this can be done in a scalable way because it can be all driven by AI. And so that's why I stress that this isn't purely a device play. Yes, we do have a one-of-a-kind device currently, but it is also to do with digital healthcare. So the approach, again, at the heart of our offering is, is a box of our device and sensors. And what you have is ultimately a device with a daily disposable sensor. And the idea is that this sensor is skin mounted, so it does not penetrate the skin. That's the key differentiator between what we have and what some of the competing devices offer today. The sensor sits on top of the skin, not inside the skin. And then we use well-established conventional enzyme-based technologies to basically measure actual glucose that is now in contact with the sensor and convert that to an electrical signal, which then gets sent by a low-energy Bluetooth directly every 5 minutes to a mobile phone app. And of course, on that phone, you then will see your profile over the course of the day. That's at the heart of our offering, that particular device. And what we then did was we took that and we've positioned it in terms of moving forward. What you will see from us over the next, let's say, 5 to 7 years are 3 core offerings. First of all, SugarBeet as a device, it will be available to buy online via various mediums, as you will see over the coming months. Secondly, we've put together a program called Beat Diabetes, and it hopefully does what it says on the can. And the idea is to try and help people to manage and rein in their diabetes, primarily in the type 2 space, and potentially also reverse diabetes. And the third being a consumer metabolic health program that we've just launched recently, the beta version of it at least, whereby the idea here is that, again, we said about we don't just want to be a device play, we want to be device and digital healthcare. But we've gone, again, another step further. And what we're saying is that just being in the clinical space isn't enough, because ideally you want to stem the tide. Ideally, when you take the US, you've got about 25 million people with type 2 diabetes, okay? But you have almost 90 million people in the US who are pre-diabetic, and the vast majority don't know it. So the ability to be able to prevent those people from potentially contracting diabetes in the first place is by far the smartest and wisest thing to do, both from a healthcare spend perspective, but also from a quality of life perspective. And this is why we launched Miboco, which is basically Mind Body Connect, and I shall talk about that a bit more detail. Where are we today with our product? So the product is a Class 2B approved, CE mark approved device in Europe, and currently still undergoing review by the FDA as part of a PMA submission that we made. In the UK, we've had orders earlier this year, and I'm delighted to say that just literally this week, we delivered our first commercial batch to our UK licensee, and we will be delivering over the next, on a bi-weekly, monthly basis to fulfill that particular order, which was initially for a couple of 100,000 sensors and 5,000 devices. And we've had a forecast for up to a couple of million sensors over the next couple of years and 15,000 devices. But of course, that figure will be revised probably every couple of months, maybe every quarter. Because the thing you have to bear in mind is that there are over 4 million people in the UK alone with diabetes, and almost another 9 million at risk of becoming diabetic. So even in a territory such as the UK, which is relatively small, the numbers are quite staggering. So the opportunities there is quite vast. And our UK licensee has, in fact, also developed a subscription-based program with which they will be offering these sensors. Outside the UK, there are a number of territories which accept the CE approval for registration purposes. Of course, in Europe, we can already sell, but places like the Middle East, Australia, Hong Kong, etc., we can sell the device with just by registering it in those territories. And we are looking at those registrations. But over the coming months, we do intend to start selling the device directly to the consumer in some of the major territories in Europe, at least to start with. Now, in terms of how it works, as I outlined earlier, essentially you get your profile, your trend of your sugar levels over the course of the day. The idea being that being able to see how lifestyle factors, dietary factors, etc., are affecting that fluctuation is far more powerful as a tool than just having that point-in-time measurement. Because the reality with a point-in-time finger prick measurement of your blood glucose level is that whilst you can estimate it or predict it, or guesstimate it, you can't really know what your sugar level may be in, let's say, an hour's time from when you took that measurement or what it was half an hour before, for example. So it is really a very important and a very powerful tool. And these are some of the testimonials that we've had back from our UK licensee, for example. And again, most people are certainly benefiting. Primarily, we find that when they are able to see that trend, it is a very positive and a very powerful psychological tool, because you are getting a picture that you otherwise have not seen or cannot see. Now, we've been asked many times, well, how does this compare with other devices on the market, et cetera, et cetera? Well, here's some volunteer data that we had back, for example. And if you look on the left, what you've got there is one of the volunteers who took finger pricks over the course of the day. And that's on the left, that's the blue line. And then you've got the red line, which is basically they were wearing, because they already happened to be wearing one of these existing invasive CGMs. And as you can see, even with that, your invasive CGMs, they're not... they don't give you precise measurements, but they give you that profile at least. And when we then compare it on the right to the sugar beet data, what I've done here is we've only given the actual raw data. And the reason we've done that, and rather than convert it to the actual glucose values, is because just to show that there isn't any heavy, if you like, algorithmic data processing. The correlations we see are quite good, because remember, we are not measuring glucose by inference. We are measuring glucose directly. There is a certain quantity of glucose that arrives at the surface of the skin. It converts via the reaction with the enzyme, and you get an electrical signal. And that is what we're measuring. And so from that point of view, the profiles and the trends that we get are certainly well within what we would want for the purpose of the applications that we intended. So I mentioned the type 2 diabetes program in the US, Beat Diabetes. And essentially what it is, again, device at the heart of it to give profiles via which we can give direct feedback to individuals. But also the digital aspect is essentially a diabetes management program that was originally developed at the Joslin Diabetes Center. And the reason we didn't go away and develop our own program is because here you have a program that has over 12 years of clinical evidence that demonstrates the clinical efficacy of that particular program. So it was a no-brainer, essentially, in terms of bringing that on board and combining it with our offering. And right now there are several pilots running, and they have been for the course of the year, being led by our colleague in Boston, Jay Warner. And the idea is that over the next few months, we will start to publish abstracts, and we will then start selling into corporates and insurers, because ultimately we think we will be providing what will be a highly cost-effective tool for the management of diabetes as compared to what is currently available. So then finally, regarding the consumer metabolic health side, so we developed this program, and we took this decision about 2 years ago. Should we not? And, it was relatively easy, given the interest that we had, to just license the device and let other people do this. But of course, the true value is in being able to offer a holistic service. And that way you generate not only do you provide a heightened level of service to the users, but also you are creating a captive audience for the various other sensor technologies that we're developing in the future, for example. But if you look at the target market, you have got over 80 million people in the US that could be potential customers of this. And if I look at the nearest, let's say, competitor to that particular offering, I would probably pick Noom. And when you consider that over the last 4 or 5 years, they've seen revenues multiplying manyfold, let's just put it that way. And currently, they have over 50 million subscribers. And I guess the key difference, I would say, or the key unique selling point comparing our offering with the likes of Noom and others is that we have a wearable sensor at the heart of our offering. That is the highest barrier to entry. Developing a product like that can take over a decade. In our case, it took us exactly a decade. And what that does is, because it then gives some real tangible insights into what's actually going on inside your body, we feel that that's going to be a significant value add for potential users. And especially when you consider our sensors aren't going to be in the range of hundreds of pounds per sensor. These sensors are literally, it could be as little as a few dollars per sensor. And especially in the metabolic health space, a person would not need more than a couple of sensors, let's say, per month. So it becomes extremely affordable, scalable, but importantly, is something that you can deploy to the masses as opposed to being restricted to those that can afford it. One of the other questions I've been asked recently is, well, there are a number of companies that have actually jumped into the field of metabolic health, because obviously everybody realizes the vastness of this market, especially when you consider the way healthcare providers and governments are now moving, is that it's not enough to be treating conditions after the fact. You want to be preemptively preventing chronic diseases. Okay. And therefore, being able to monitor metabolic health over the long term and essentially prevent the onset of chronic disease is by far the smartest way to go. Okay. And this is why programs like this are most likely to attract reimbursement. And here's a reason. And so I've been asked the question, well, what about other programs that are using CGMs, for example, continuous glucose monitors, to provide this kind of service? Well, there are services like that, and they are, of course, using the invasive sensors because that's all that's available to them. And there are certain, challenges associated with the use of those devices. First of all, you are using a significant needle to insert a filament in the skin. And secondly, you can see the middle picture, bruising on the skin. The other picture, you've got trauma on the skin again. And this does arise. And these are reported in the public domain. And so trying to sell a consumer product with a device like so is challenging. Let's put it that way. Therefore, we do believe we still have a significant USP in terms of our product. So just to finish off very quickly, future products. One of the ones I would stress, is the continuous lactate monitoring. We are planning to do some clinicals early in the new year, and then we expect that sometime during 2022 that we should be having a product on the market that also does lactate monitoring. And of course, that initially would have huge applications in the athletics performance market. And so we do see that as a lucrative opportunity. And there are other applications in, let's say, alcohol monitoring and drug monitoring, for example, all of which are quite significant opportunities for us in the future. In terms of the team, we continue to build a world-class team, and right now we are in the process of hiring for a chief marketing and sales officers, both in the US and in Europe. And in terms of IP, again, as you know, when patents are filed, they generally don't get published for the first 18 months. Whilst we've got several patents that are already in the public domain, some of our core patents are yet to be published. And of course, then there's substantial know-how also involved in terms of what we do, both in terms of the sensor technology and the algorithms. So to finish off, in summary, we've now started commercializing, and we are now recognizing revenues, given that we've now dispatched and delivered our first batches of commercial product. The PMA review is in progress. There aren't any other sensors that allow you to use to apply on the arm and use it on a daily basis as and when you want to. So we do have a first mover advantage in that sense, and especially given that it can take several years, 5 to 10 years often, to develop a product like this, we do have, we believe, a significant head start in terms of what we can potentially achieve. And then the revenue generation models are quite simple, direct consumer, as well as sales to corporates and insurers. And these are highly scalable business models. And we have a healthy cash balance at the moment with still a relatively low quarterly burn. That's all I want to say. I really appreciate your time, and thank you very much for listening. So any questions there may be, thank you.
We are unfortunately up against the clock, but Dr. Faz Chowdhury is the CEO of Nemaura Medical, ticker NMRD. Dr. Chowdhury, thank you so much for coming on the last Benzinga Small Cap Conference of 2021.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.